Welcome to the Elephant TV. My name is Abdullahi, and our guest today is Adisalem. Adisalem is a lawyer who's been closely following what is going on in Ethiopia over at least now, 2 years since the conflict broke, but even before that. And he also served in the foreign service of the Ethiopian government. Adisalem, welcome to the Elephant TV.
Thank you, Abdullahi, and thank you, the Elephant, for hosting me.
Yeah. So I just want to start with, these two separate conflicting visions about Ethiopia. There are those who believe that Ethiopia should be centralized under the guise of unity, and so everything should be concentrated in Addis. And then there are other people who hold, a more multi-ethnic federalism that Ethiopia is as of now. How do you see these two strands? The strands of people believe in the centralized, old, glorious in quote, of Ethiopian people who say, no, it wasn't in fact glorious. We need an Ethiopia that is inclusive, language, culture, politics, and everything.
Thank you. Just to start from, you have raised it between the lines. Ethiopia's glorious past. Do Ethiopia really had a glorious past? The thing is, the members of the federation, the elements, the people that have constituted Ethiopia had enjoyed glorious past individually. The Tigrayans had 3,000 plus years of glorious history. The Oromos have their own glorious history, and the Walaita and others have their own glorious history. Of course, the Kamant and the Zagwe that are undergoing persecution, they have their own glorious history. They have the Lalibelas and others are historical evidences. But as a country, it doesn't have a glorious past than the glorious past of the individual constituencies. And the very reason what people tend to forget, or whether it is by design or by default, is they base themselves on false premises that Ethiopia was great and it will be great. And to achieve those elements, they will go to the extent of exterminating a specific category of people that are against those aspirations. And the basic elements that should be introspected is, are those aspirations shared aspirations? And this leads you to the way Ethiopia was constituted, the state formation, the state building process of Ethiopia. It is historically clear that Ethiopia was formed by subjugation, subjugating others, subjugating peoples that were administering themselves, that were enjoying their own proud history, having their own glorious past, and they were incorporated. While, of course, like most of the African countries, Ethiopia, though some claim it is uncolonized, but it is the end result of the colonial expansion. And to come back to your question, the unity incorporating every nationality to a monolithic, monochromic identity, it was not something that was not tried. It was tried for centuries and it failed miserably. Not because the unitary system is bad, it works in other countries, but the values which the Ethiopian unitary system is based, it is not on a mere state structure. It is an instrument of subjugation and subliming others or assimilating others towards those prescribed identity, language, culture, religion, one culture, one religion, one identity. And those are contradictory, irreconcilable aspirations. And apologies if I am taking too much of your time, but
it's important you're not taking too much of the time, because a lot of the time when people talk about Ethiopia, there is always this tendency of glossing over some of this brutal history of Ethiopia, because we've got this vision of, or this history of Ethiopia, that we did all these remarkable things, and then we are continuing to do that remarkable thing when the genie is out of the bottle. What I wonder also for you to speak, because the reason why I started with that question is it's an important question, because these two visions is at the heart of many things, not least the current ongoing conflict between the Ethiopian federal government and the Tigray region. But over the last few weeks, there has been a humanitarian truce that was announced. Do you think the truce will hold, and how do you see it yourself?
Yeah, definitely. Let me continue the element I was reserving, and I will proceed to the current developments. And as I was saying, the aspirations are not something that can be reconciled. Other countries that have similar formation defects, they call them formation defects in state building. They have went through an incremental change in addressing those historical formation defects, like countries like Germany, the United States, and other countries were formed with a brutal force. That's a fact. But what those countries have done is they have managed to install a democratic system that not only to address their current and future aspirations, but also to address their historical legacies. Unlike those countries, Ethiopia has managed to go through to continue the historical misgivings in such a way that the elites that are for one culture, one identity, monochromic identity, by default or by design, they have opted for such system, and anyone challenging the system is faced with a brutal force. And they have so much so that they have perceived the installment of a democratic order as a threat to their national survival, because in a democratic order you cannot impose your values, your religion, and your identity on others without their consent. And for anyone that follows Ethiopian history, it should not be that much difficult to understand the trends. Those elites have been supporting Haile Selassie. They are a diehard Minilik supporters, and they have supported the military dictatorship of the Derg, and now they are supporting Abiy. Those are not just a coincidences. They are how the patterns those group of elites work. They are convinced that a dictatorial or an aristocrat form of government better serves their aspirations than a democratic order. And in such kind of government structure or aspirations, that's why I was using irreconcilable aspirations, because if there are elites that doesn't accept as democracy as a way forward, there is no way that you can reconcile those basic contradictions. And when I come to your question on current developments, even the main reason of the war has been lack of willingness to address those differences amicably through political discussion. When the election was in the 2020 election was postponed indefinitely without against the spirit of the constitution. Many political elites that are including Oromo elites and even some Amhara pro-federal democratic order, they have objected to the postponement of the election, and they were arrested until recently. And some of them have fled the country, like politicians like Ledbeto Ayalew, Jawar Mohammed was arrested, Bakalaw Garba was arrested, simply because there was no any appetite to address those political loopholes the country was facing. And the war has proceeded that way because the only solution that were opted by the regime in Addis has been to address those differences through a brutal force, like what the previous government have done towards their furthering their interests. And the current development should be perceived through this lens. And though I am normally an optimist person, but sometimes your optimism should not guard you from
being a realist.
Exactly, from looking into what is happening. And the recent declaration of to use the Addis government language, it is unilateral, indefinite humanitarian truce. They have managed to use words that doesn't go along. Truce by its nature, it is a temporary, and it cannot be unilateral. It should be agreed by the parties to the conflict, and of course it can be for humanitarian or a specific purposes. But what the regime in Addis has said is, I have declared unilaterally an indefinite humanitarian truce, where on the ground there is no any humanitarian access. Only certain trucks have arrived since mid-December 2021, and no fuel have reached Tigray since July 2021. It is going to be almost a year, and the military developments are ongoing on the ground. And I will not be, anyone should not be fooled multiple times to the sense, in the sense that Abiy government, had he had any appetite for peaceful dialogue, the war that is ongoing for almost 2 years would have been unnecessary. But that is not how the government operates. It survives through crisis. Its brand is crisis. It cannot survive without those crises, to the extent of waging a genocidal war with foreign elements. But back to your question, those that are announcements on humanitarian truce, they are not going to deliver. They are not delivering, and they were not designed to deliver. They are just a temporary tactical moves to lower the diplomatic and political pressure coming from the West, to buy some time for another offensive. And observing the recent developments, especially the government declaration to wipe out the Oromo Liberation Army, which is the other party engaged in brutal war with the government in Addis, they are using the humanitarian truce with Tigray, so that to prioritize forces. Let us keep Tigray with the forest premises of humanitarian truce, so that we will finish with a major offensive in Oromia, and we will come back to Tigray once we finish that project. And shortly, it was just a tactical move, an empty promise that was designed from the outset not to bear any fruit.
Thank you. And so what do you see is the best way out of this conflict? I mean, naturally, or at least historically on the continent, some of the conflicts have ended via political settlement between and amongst the warring parties. Do you see the same in this conflict that is almost 2 years now?
I think from the other parties that are engaging in a survival war with the federal government and its allies, I don't think there is difficulty in exploring peaceful settlements from the Tigray side and from the Oromo opposition side. Everyone's question has been, is the federal government willing? And for a government that have waged a war with the aspirations that the war is going to be finalized within days, first they have miscalculated the extent of their decision, both in Tigray and Oromia. They thought that whatever plans they have, they can impose on the people against their will, and that miscalculation have failed miserably. And now what is more difficult is, first, there is a lack of interest to find a political settlement from the federal government, and throughout 2 years, due to the involvement of external forces, including Eritrea and other forces, it has made the effort of finding a political settlement extremely difficult. And for the government in Addis, there cannot be any realistic expectations that it will all of a sudden opt for or show willingness towards finding a sustainable solution. But what can be done is our expectation has been the international community, especially the US and the European Union, will exert their maximum pressure so that the federal government will be left with no any other options than to find a settlement. But given the lack of a coordinated, targeted action, it looks like the government in Addis is going to enter into a protracted conflict as long as the Abiy government and its allies stay in power. The only way out is we have to be at the same time to see a light at the end of the tunnel, but that to be realized, the international community should respond in such a way that the parties to the conflict will reconsider their behavior. For that to happen, the Eritrean government should lead Ethiopia. The Ethiopian government should be imposed with the maximum pressure to realize that war is not going to be realistic. It was not realistic. It has resulted those atrocities and those material destructions that we are observing now. But for that to happen, the international community should impose a targeted actions on all parties to be politically neutral. But deep inside, we know that it is only the federal government that is unwilling to engage in those in finding political settlement.
And finally, one of the things is, if the political settlement comes about, what do you think is how will accountability be done? Because obviously, egregious human rights violations have been conducted by parties to the conflict.
Of course, there are different possibilities can be explored. The first gateway would have been, of course, had Ethiopia had strong institutions, finding a domestic solution would have been an ideal scenario. It was done before, but it was done after the Derg military dictatorship was defeated. It was post-victory justice mechanism. The officials of the Derg government were tried after 1991. That is an optimal scenario. The next alternative would have been an African Union-led process where the African Union will set up, as part of the comprehensive political settlement, a hybrid court like what they have done in South Sudan. And though it was years after Hissène Habré left power, but the Hissène Habré case would have been an arrangement similar to Hissène Habré would be a good option. But the challenge with African Union is it doesn't involve itself in responsibility, accountability mechanism, while those officials are still in power. It was the same with Hissène Habré and other accounting mechanisms. The only option left as a depot at efforts in finding accountability in Ethiopia is the recently established inquiry commission mechanism, the Ethiopian International Committee of Experts on Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia. And if the Ethiopian government allows access, it is a big if, because we have witnessed that the Ethiopian government is not willing, because the government and its allies know what they have done. And I will not, everyone should not be surprised why they are blocking access, because they know that what they have done, and if they allow, the facts are going to be made public. And the only option left is for that inquiry commission to hit the ground running, to find those facts, to establish the facts on the ground, and based on those findings, the Human Rights Council and including the United Nations Security Council could refer those individuals that were found to be responsible in the more than 2 years genocidal war to be tried with the ICC and other mechanisms. Those individuals could be from different groups within the parties to the conflict. It could be, we know that the majority of the responsibilities where that responsibility is going to fall, but the inquiry procedure, the inquiry commission procedure established by the Human Rights Council would be instrumental in finding responsibilities. But that is going to be also a good wish without the Ethiopian government allowing humanitarian access. That's why a coordinated, targeted action, so that an access should be allowed to the international human rights experts on Ethiopia is going to be an important step.
No, thank you so much, Adisalem. It was a pleasure hosting you. I hope we'll have another time to be able to discuss these and many issues in Ethiopia. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend and take care.